Hello, our live stream today will be about something very interesting, which is faith. And we are in San Diego, and today is November 19th, 2025, in San Diego. We are participating in the Neuroscience Conference. We've seen many things here, but today we're going to talk about faith, but from a neuroscientific perspective. And you'll understand a little more about faith. And I'll also touch on something sensitive, which is dopamine. People get a little confused about dopamine, but focusing on faith, on the need for faith. So the most important thing for us to know is what faith is. I spoke with several researchers, and when I talk about faith, they get chills. Oh, it's terribly frightening. Faith is something mystical, it's something complicated. Faith is something that people seem not to want to touch. So, what I did with the researchers to make things easier was to have them talk about faith 10,000 years ago among the Umbus peoples. Umbus is the people who lived in southern Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina 10,000 years ago, and for them to make a spearhead out of quartz, that would only be possible with high performance. That is only possible with faith, and that's how we understand what faith is. Faith is a ritual of a civilization that involves many things, from childhood until the moment that person practices their faith. What are we seeing now with our young people who were born after the year 2000? We are seeing something very important with our young people who were born after the year 2000. They lack faith. And that's what we're going to talk about today. First, my concept of what faith is. To have this concept firmly in mind, we really have to look at the people from the past, the Umbus, 10,000 years ago. But we're also going to look at you, we're going to look at myself when we learn to ride a bicycle. And we're going to look at my vision of the extended Yãy Hã Miy. Yãy Hã Miy, it's an Amerindian word, it's ancestral knowledge, which means the following. The tribe, the indigenous people who want to hunt, imitate that hunt and all the customs of that hunt and then go hunting. In our case, it's the extended Yãy Hã Miy. So in every culture, the baby starts to imitate the parents, imitate sounds, imitate movements, imitate noises, if necessary. This imitation, after the imitation, there's a bit of habit because this imitation begins to repeat. Notice when the baby starts to imitate, something happens in the brain. When it starts to repeat this imitation, something new happens in the brain. Then it becomes a habit, something new happens in the brain. Then it becomes a belief, something new happens in the brain. Then it becomes faith, you see. Faith is an attribute of this imitation, of this impulse to imitate being in order to transcend being. And we stop at faith. And in faith, after faith, there are two paths, two interesting paths to follow. One can go straight to blind faith or to high performance. In the case of the cumbus, which was making the spearhead, the child imitated the father or the uncle or the elders who made these spearheads. Imitating, it became a custom, it became a habit, it became a belief, it became faith, it became high performance. In high performance, you execute the movements of breaking the stone, and that touch on the stone is responding to you. The wrong touches are not repeated. But you're not thinking anymore because you have developed the faith for high performance. And it's faith. The word is faith. And riding a bicycle, in the beginning, you saw your little brother or someone or uncle, someone riding a bicycle, and you tried to imitate them, or on a skateboard, you tried to imitate them. Imitation, repetition, repetition, repetition of that. So you imitate. You then create these processes of habit, of belief that you can do a trick on a skateboard or a trick on a bicycle. And after faith, through so much repetition, your brain system is forming. It's a brain formation to provide the necessary requirements for faith. Faith is pure biology. It's a biological structure. So what are we doing? Giving the brain the necessary training to develop faith. Look how important that is in society. Developing faith. For what purpose? After faith, there is a choice: high performance faith or blind faith. What is blind faith? Blind faith is when I no longer question, I no longer use metacognition about what I believe in my faith. I follow it, and every time something goes wrong, I either kneel or pray or meditate to force what I believe to resolve what I observe in the world. That is blind faith. High performance faith, on the other hand, is not. I rely on faith, but if something goes wrong, I question that faith. I change it a little, I adjust it, I modulate it, I change some parameters, and I continue using faith, but adjusted. I adjust my faith. Faith with high performance, faith has been elevated to high performance, and blind faith, no, it's closed off. If I believe in the Quran, whatever happens, I'll read the Quran or the Torah or the Bible or any sacred book, because if something goes wrong for me, I have the flu, I'll read the Bible, because if I read the Bible and I have the flu, I'll get better. So that's blind faith. Blind faith is resorting to faith to solve a biological problem, which makes no sense at all, or even a financial one, which makes no sense at all. Obviously, for every million people who practice this act, something happens that confirms their faith. Yes, but in a million people, it will be 1% or 2%. And remember that I tell you that the truth, or our reality, has to be more than 70% of the cases. And in more than 70% of the cases, those who resort to blind faith to solve problems solve nothing. They simply become dulled by blind faith. Okay, Jackson, you said you were going to talk a little about dopamine. We live in a society addicted to dopamine. When you were a baby, when you started pretending to ride a bike, there was a motivation within you, and that motivation always had to do with predicting the future. Dopamine is about predicting the future, and dopamine is about predicting the future with something bad for you, okay? What is that bad thing for you? I'm going to predict the future, but I'm going to kidnap you from the present moment. I'm going to kidnap the intention. So, when you wanted to ride a bike, your parents were there, you were with family, you were playing with things, but you leave that situation, you deny where you are, you deny being present in order to buy the future. I'm going to learn to ride a bike. I'm going to learn to skateboard. Did you notice? So, dopamine sells you the future in exchange for the present. You give up the present to enjoy it. The taste of dopamine. Dopamine is an endogenous drug within you. It's a drug that you secrete yourself. And this drug, when you're like, wow, how cool is this? I want this. I can do this. I'm going to achieve that. You understand? On social media, your feed is dopamine after dopamine. But dopamine, this drug, has a very short lifespan, half a second. So I need this all the time. I'm buying the future and losing the present. I'm buying the future with dopamine. The drug comes and I want the dopamine and I'm selling the present. Okay, so the child, I'm going to get the umbu fruit, which they were going to learn to hit against the pebble, right? And make a spear and umbu fruit from 10,000 years ago. The child starts by watching their father or uncle do it, and they go and try to play a little and give up. They try to play a little and give up again because they're not succeeding, and the dopamine starts to drop because dopamine has something that's really nice. You give something done by an individual gives a return. The dopamine level is that high. That same thing, they do it, it gives the same return. The dopamine level is that high. Again, the dopamine drops a little. Again, the dopamine drops a little. Again, it drops a little. Again, it drops a little. When you do the same thing and get a positive return, the dopamine level will drop. Dopamine also, if you do something and the return comes, and sometimes it doesn't, maintains the level. So, what happens on social media? Sometimes you see something you like, and sometimes you see something you don't like. You're not sure if the next thing will be what you like. So if you're not sure if the next thing is what you like, your dopamine is always at its peak. It's at its maximum. So your social network showing you what you like and sometimes neutral things leaves you with the dopamine drug you generate, an endogenous drug at its maximum. Because sometimes it's what you want and sometimes it's not. And sometimes it is what you want. So the dopamine stays at its maximum. Repeating If you have a stimulus to look at something and dopamine appears, and if you look at that same thing and it appears again, the dose decreases. If you like the thing, the return, okay? So when this stimulus is rare, it can stay high on the internet and on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on TikTok, and in newspapers too, and on television. You understand? You keep playing if it's what you like, the dopamine goes up. If it's intermittent, sometimes it's what you like, sometimes it's not what you like, it stays high, very high dopamine. And if it's the same thing, the same return, it will decrease. What's happening? If I do something and it gives the same return, I'm leaving the imitation process, the Yãy Hã Miy imitation. And after imitation, it will become a habit. I have the imitation and it will become a habit. In the habit, I'm no longer looking at the dopaminergic reward. In the habit, I'm growing in the habit in doing that thing, which is, for example, brushing my teeth. In the beginning, maybe a little something cold in my mouth to brush my teeth. But then it's a habit, you'll brush your teeth. Or in the beginning, riding a bicycle is all that excitement. Once you start walking out of habit, the dopamine levels won't be as high anymore because it's the same thing you're doing, but you're developing your skills. Your brain is maturing because you were imitating imitation. It's becoming a habit, obviously. You could add other words in there, and it's also more important to know that when someone does something outside and you're watching, when you see someone doing something outside, someone riding a bicycle, someone doing something, that movement comes inside you in the areas as if you were doing that thing. Where does our great prejudice as humans begin? Imagine me doing that. How disgusting. I'm disgusted by that movement inside my head, which is between the neuron and the mirror. And then I project that disgust onto that person with mannerisms, onto that person who is fatter, thinner, shorter, taller, it doesn't matter, with that way of speaking, with that way of moving. So I project the prejudice that is me doing that. I'm disgusted by that. I have an aversion to that. So the prejudice towards the other is because you don't accept yourself doing that. Because the moment you see it, you're already feeling yourself doing it, and then you deny it. Rebellion. And then the process shifts to rebellion directed at the other, at the enemy. The enemy is that which does what you do and thinks what you think. That is the great enemy. That's precisely what they do in political movements, especially those on the far right. Accuse them of what we do and think. And then, by accusing them of what we do and think, they become the enemy. Then you'll see in the far right what they accuse others of is what they are most of. So this is a very sophisticated topic. Let's go back to faith. Why isn't the teenager having faith? Because teenagers are addicted, especially those born after 2000, those who are now 25 years old, and younger ones too, because internet regulations weren't implemented. So there's this accumulated heavy addiction. Why is he lacking faith? Because look, in the first imitation, dopamine, in habits, dopamine is decreasing. In belief, you only believe that it's the best for your future. Studying is the best for your future, but there's no more dopamine. Ah, so you want to drop out of school? I don't want to anymore because I don't have the dopamine rush anymore. You don't want it anymore because you're addicted to it. And this addiction to dopamine makes you only seek more dopamine. And dopamine is always found in what is different. In what is the same, dopamine levels drop. Yes, but that's what happens with brain maturation. First, you imitate, then you create a habit, then a belief, then faith. It's only through faith that you will do things for the sake of doing them without seeking reward. Because those who are seeking reward are the same ones who are still seeking drugs. There are a lot of people who do things even after their father or mother has passed away, still doing them to be recognized by their parents who are no longer with us, because they do it to be rewarded, to be seen, to be appreciated, praised, and compensated. They lack faith. Why was faith lacking? Because in the beginning it was imitation, it was habit, it was the belief in doing what should be done, and then faith came. Okay, young people are now around 25 years old, and at 25, brain maturity begins to develop between the ages of 25 and 35. This brain maturity means you can think about your thoughts, you can think about your desires, where your desires come from. And I'm talking to you, young people, 25, 24, 23, 12, 13, 14, from pre-adolescence up to this age. I'm talking to you. The internet has addicted us to dopamine. You have to question why you are being driven by dopamine and not by imitation, habit, belief, and faith. Faith is doing something without expecting immediate reward. Religious faith is wanting the reward after death, okay? These are paths. But even within that religious faith, you leave certain habits ingrained in those people. Good habits, cultural habits, they should be good precisely. If religion is instilling bad habits and beliefs, bad behaviors in people, the state has to step in and say, look, not this religion. Why? This religion compromises lifespan, it compromises people's happiness. So faith is an instrument. It's a tool to be used, a tool where you do things without seeking reward, without seeking dopamine, because there's a reward tomorrow, next week. Next year, you'll do the things that need to be done this year for the reward in 10 years. Go to college, study. It will be a reward you'll have in 5, 10 years. No, but I want the reward now. Dopamine, you're addicted. Did you notice? That's what lack of faith is. Something that when I talk about faith, the researcher found it very strange and said, Jackson, change a name. The name Faith belongs to a researcher who is Catholic. The name Faith has a very religious connection for me, he said. So I said, what I mean by faith is, Parkinson's disease, Parkinson's disease when a person stops moving. She is stopping the movement because the synchronization of brain areas and brain movements is not occurring. So she knows how to walk, she knows how to walk, she used to walk, she used to walk, but she stopped because the synchronicity isn't happening. Because faith isn't happening due to biological reasons, due to a lack of synchronicity. This person has Parkinson's, and she also has deep depression and other illnesses that cause this. The synchronicity starts to fail. That's the faith I'm talking about. It's biological faith. It's faith in the synchronicity between brain and body movements. That's the faith I'm talking about. Of course, religiosity seeks this faith, seizes it, and demands that you give offerings. To make a profit. That's fine, it's valid. But it also fosters that same belief in synchronicity that we feel we are one with everyone. And it's important for you to know this. What kind of faith are you developing? You know how to walk. If, for example, you wake up in bed today or tomorrow and you've lost faith in your ability to get up and walk, you won't get up and you won't walk. Faith is the biological synchronicity you possess. But sometimes it's just the cognitive aspect that can block you. Yes, but in the case of Parkinson's, it's not the cognitive aspect, it's the entire biological part that's blocked and compromised in the synchronization of brain networks. So that's exactly what I mean by faith, that synchronicity within yourself. It's a sense of belonging, a core, a human sense of being with yourself. You are in sync. And that synchronicity allows you to move. It allows you to come and go and also to think. Thought always comes after movement. Thought comes after an altered breath, after a different heartbeat. Thought doesn't come before. In fact, you ratify what your body is doing with certain memories and thoughts. Thought doesn't come before movement. It's the movement that comes first. It's the body that comes first. And it elaborates its thoughts on top of that. But what about when I'm lying down sleeping? You're reviewing what happened during the day, folks. This idea I wanted to share with you is a little shorter, but I want to talk to you about it. Faith is a biological structure of synchronicity. Today's teenagers, without the regulation of social media, are addicted to dopamine. Everything is very fast. It has a half-second cycle and it ends, and I want another, I want another, I want another. These are people who can't stay still. They feel anxiety, a serious problem because they are addicted. They're overloaded with dopamine. It's a lack of faith. It's a lack of doing, of imitating, of structuring things, of having belief. The other day, my mother had some problems, a bit of depression, something like that. And she talked to one sister and then another about what was happening, and then she verbalized their problems. Obviously, there are many problems. She's over 80 years old. She has a lot of other problems, but she verbalized it this way: it's a lack of things to do. Okay, lack of things to do is that. To act on faith, to practice faith is to do. Without expecting a reward. It's doing for the sake of doing. Teenagers don't have that anymore. They want to do it to get dopamine. They want dopamine. They don't want to stay in the present. They don't want belonging. They don't want family. They don't want us together. No, I want to go there. I want to go there. And when they get there, they want to go here. They don't always want what's best for the teenager or for that place because they expect the future. They sold the future. They lost the present. But what caused this? Unregulated internet, because unregulated internet is addicting our teenagers, giving them dopamine all the time. And dopamine, sometimes yes, sometimes no, randomly, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So dopamine is being given in maximum quantities every day, several times a day. So our teenagers are addicted to dopamine, an internal drug, endogenous. Our teenagers lack faith. Those over 40 or 50 years old, I'm over 60, need to gradually explain to teenagers this process of imitating habits, beliefs, and faith. It can lead to blind faith, to faith that also leads to high performance, which involves movements, doing what needs to be done, the things that culture should do to preserve itself. So, when teenagers begin to have this relationship, this metacognition between 25 and 35 years old, they will mature enough to understand it. But if they remain addicted to social media and keep feeding off of X or Facebook, on TikTok, you'll be obsessed with dopamine, 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 and you won't grow or add value to your own body. That's what I wanted to leave you with. Big hug. See you next Wednesday. I'm not in charge.